It all started with Jimmy, who decided to visit the doctor because, well, something was terribly wrong. "Doc," Jimmy exclaimed, "wherever I touch, it hurts." The doctor, curious and a bit puzzled, asked, "What do you mean, Jimmy?" With a dramatic flair, Jimmy started poking himself. "When I touch my shoulder, ouch, it hurts. When I touch my knee, ouch again, it hurts. And when I touch my forehead, ouch, 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 it really, really hurts." The doctor took a deep breath, trying not to laugh, and finally said, "Jimmy, you've got a broken index finger." The look on Jimmy's face was priceless. He had been convinced it was something far more serious. Who knew a single broken finger could cause so much drama? Speaking of drama, let me tell you about the worst day ever. There I was, sitting at the bar, trying to drown my sorrows in a drink, when a large, menacing biker stomped over, grabbed my drink, and downed it in one gulp. "What are you going to do about it?" he growled, clearly enjoying himself. Tears welled up in my eyes as I blurted out, "This is the worst day of my life." The biker raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that reaction. "Why?" he asked, somewhat taken aback. I took a deep breath and unloaded the whole tragic tale. I was late to a meeting today, and my boss fired me. Then, when I went to the parking lot, my car was gone, stolen, just like that. And guess what? I don't have insurance. So, I took a cab home, but I left my wallet in it. When I got home, I found my wife with another man, and to top it all off, my dog bit me. I came here to end it all, dropped a suicide capsule in my drink, and now, you just drank it. The biker's face turned a shade of green I'd never seen before. "Oh no," he whispered, suddenly not feeling so tough. But bikers aren't the only ones having a rough time. 3 rough-and-tumble bikers walked into a diner one morning. They spotted an old man quietly eating his breakfast, and decided to have some fun. The first biker put out his cigarette in the old man's pancakes. The second biker spat a wad of chewing tobacco into the old man's coffee. The third biker simply grabbed the old man's plate and threw it on the floor. The old man didn't say a word. He calmly got up, paid his bill, and left the diner. The bikers laughed. "Not much of a man, was he?" one of them sneered. The waitress, who had seen the whole thing, looked at them and replied, "Not much of a driver either. He just backed his truck over your 3 motorcycles." Sometimes, life gives you lemons, but if you're clever, you can make lemonade, or at least, you can try. Like this dog who walked into a bank. Yes, a dog. He wanted a loan for a new doghouse, and brought a knick-knack as collateral. The teller, a lady named Patty Whack, looked at the knick-knack and said, "This isn't worth enough for the loan you want." The dog wasn't having it. He barked at her in frustration, and demanded to see the manager. When the manager came out, he looked at the knick-knack, then at Patty and said, "It's a knick-knack, Patty Whack, give the dog a loan." The dog left the bank, tail wagging, with the loan approval in his paw. But not everyone has such luck. A couple was shopping at the mall on Christmas Eve, and as always, the mall was packed. The wife looked around and realized that her husband had mysteriously disappeared. She was annoyed because they had so much to do. She called him on his phone and asked, "Where are you?" In a calm voice, her husband replied, "Honey, do you remember the jewelry store we went into about 5 years ago? The one where you fell in love with that diamond necklace that we couldn't afford, and I promised you I would get it for you one day." Tears welled up in her eyes as she said, "Yes, I remember." He said, "Well, I'm in the bar right next to it." Now, let's take a moment to appreciate the magic of modern technology, or the confusion it can cause. An Amish family went to a mall for the first time. They were overwhelmed by everything they saw, especially the elevator. The father, curious and bewildered, watched as a very large woman entered the elevator. The doors closed, and when they opened again, a young, beautiful woman stepped out. The father turned to his son and said, "Go get your mother. Age is just a number, right?" An 80-year-old man went to the doctor for a checkup. The doctor was amazed at how good of shape the man was in and asked, "To what do you attribute your good health?" The old man smiled and said, "I'm a golfer. I'm up before daylight, out on the fairways, walking the course every day. The doctor nodded and asked, "Well, how old was your father when he died?" The old man looked surprised. "Who said my father is dead?" The doctor, even more surprised, asked, "You mean your father is still alive? How old is he?" The old man replied, "He's 100 years old, and we golf together every morning." The doctor was stunned. "That's incredible. But how about your grandfather? How old was he when he died?" The old man laughed. "Who said he's dead?" Now the doctor was really confused. "You mean your grandfather is still alive too? How old is he?" The old man grinned. "He's 118 years old." The doctor, barely able to contain his amazement, asked, "And does he golf with you too?" The old man shook his head. "No, Grandpa couldn't make it this morning. He got married." The doctor's jaw dropped. Married? Why would a 118-year-old man want to get married? The old man winked and said, "Who said he wanted to? Kids say the darndest things, don't they?" Little Johnny was walking through the mall with his grandma when he spotted a coin on the ground. "Grandma, can I pick that up?" he asked. Grandma shook her head. "No, no, everything on the ground is dirty." They walked a bit further, and Johnny saw a €5 note. "Grandma, can I pick that up?" She shook her head again. "No, no, everything on the ground is dirty." Then, they walked even further, and Johnny spotted a €100 note. His eyes lit up. "Grandma, can I pick that up?" But once again, she said, "No, no, everything on the ground is dirty." As they continued walking, Grandma suddenly slipped on a banana peel and fell to the ground. "Johnny, can you help me up?" she asked. Johnny looked at her and shook his head. "No, no, everything on the ground is dirty." Memory isn't always what it used to be, especially as we get older. A couple in their 90s were both having trouble remembering things, so they decided to visit the doctor. The doctor told them that physically, they were fine, but it might be a good idea to start writing things down to help them remember. Later that night, as they were watching TV, the old man got up from his chair. "Where are you going?" his wife asked. "To the kitchen," he replied. "Will you get me a bowl of ice cream?" she asked. "Sure," he said. "Don't you think you should write it down so you can remember?" she suggested. "No, I can remember that," he said. "I'd like some strawberries on top, too," she added. "You'd better write it down, because you know you'll forget," she insisted. "I can remember that you want a bowl of ice cream with strawberries," he said, getting a bit irritated. "And I'd also like whipped cream," she said. "I'm certain you'll forget that, so you'd better write it down," she retorted. "I don't need to write it down. I can remember it. Ice cream with strawberries and whipped cream. I got it, for goodness sake." He grumbled his way into the kitchen. After about 20 minutes, he returned and handed his wife a plate of bacon and eggs. She stared at the plate for a moment and then asked, "Where's my toast?" Relationships can be tricky, especially when money is tight. Harry and his wife were having financial difficulties, so they decided that she would try to earn some extra money as a hooker. Not quite sure what to do, Harry told her, "Just stand in front of that bar and pick up a guy. Tell him you charge $100. If you have any questions, I'll be parked around the corner." She stood there for about 5 minutes when a guy pulled up and asked, "How much?" She said, $100. The man replied, "All I've got is 30. So, she ran back to Harry and asked, "What can he get for 30? Harry replied, "A hand job." She ran back and told the guy, "All you get for 30 is a hand job." He agreed, and she got in the car. When he unzipped his pants, out popped the biggest one she'd ever seen. She stared at it for a minute and then said, "I'll be right back." She ran back to Harry and asked, "Can you loan this guy $70? Sometimes, misunderstandings can lead to some hilarious situations. A mother-in-law arrived home from the mall to find her son-in-law boiling with anger and hurriedly packing his suitcase. "What happened?" she asked anxiously. "What happened? I'll tell you what happened." I sent an email to my wife telling her I was coming home today from my business trip. I get home, and guess what I found? Yes, your daughter, my wife, with a guy in our marital bed. This is unforgivable. It's the end of our marriage. I'm done. I'm leaving forever. The mother-in-law, trying to calm him down, said, "My son, there's something very odd going on here. My daughter would never do such a thing. There must be a simple explanation. I'll go speak to her immediately and find out what happened." Moments later, she returned with a big smile on her face. "I told you there must be a simple explanation." She didn't get the email. And then there's the story of 3 boys named Trouble, Shut Up, and Be Quiet. One day, the boys went to the mall, and as you might guess, Trouble got lost. Shut Up and Be Quiet went up to a police officer and said, "We can't find our brother." The officer asked, "What's his name?" The boys replied, "Trouble." The officer, confused, asked, "What are your names?" The boys replied, "Shut Up and Be Quiet." The officer, now thoroughly annoyed, said, "Are you looking for trouble?" The boys grinned and said, "Yes." Of course, not all stories end so well. 2 old-timers in a retirement home were reminiscing about the good old days, when they realized they hadn't been with women in a long time. So, they decided to visit the nearest brothel. When they arrived, they asked the pimp to find them the best hookers they had. The pimp took one look at them and said, "I know exactly what you need." On their way out, one asked the other, "How was it?" The first replied, "It was a bit stiff, and she didn't move much." The other old-timer said, "At least yours wasn't a witch. I got a bit rough with mine, and she farted and flew out of the window." Farming isn't what it used to be either. A farmer needed money to plant his annual crop of peanuts, but times had been hard, and the bank refused to lend to anyone planning to plant peanuts, because the crops had been so poor. The banker suggested he try planting sunflowers instead. The farmer, devastated but desperate, agreed. At harvest time, another farmer asked how the sunflowers had worked out. The farmer admitted they had done very well, so well that he expected to be able to pay back the bank, put money away for the winter, and possibly even have money left over for next year's peanuts. Moral of the story: sometimes, you just have to bloom where you're planted. One day, I was doing tourist stuff in New Orleans and had gone down to the waterfront. I was sitting on a bench, looking out at the water, when a guy came up to me and offered me a bet. "I bet you $5 I can tell you where you got your shoes," he said. I was from several states away, so I figured there was no way this guy could guess which shoe store at the local mall I had purchased my sneakers at. So, I agreed to the bet. The guy put out his hand for us to shake on it and assured me he would pay if he was wrong, and he asked me to do the same. I did. He grinned and said, "Now I'm going to tell you where you got your shoes. You got your shoes on your feet." I laughed and paid the $5. Sometimes, you just have to admire a clever con artist. Speaking of clever, let me tell you about an old farmer who had owned his large farm in Louisiana for many years. Right at the back of the farm, there was a large pond that was ideal for swimming. The old farmer had fixed it up really nicely with picnic tables, horseshoe courts, and some apple and peach trees. One evening, the farmer decided to go down to the pond to look it over, as he hadn't been down there for a while. Before setting off, he grabbed a 5-gallon bucket, deciding he would bring back some fruit. As he neared the pond, he could hear voices shouting and laughing with glee. Clearly, someone was having a good time. As the farmer got closer, he could see a bunch of young women who were skinny dipping in his pond. He made the women aware of his presence, and immediately they all swam over to the far end of the pond. One of the women shouted, "We're not coming out until you leave, mister." The farmer replied, "Ladies, I didn't come down here to watch you swim naked or make you get out of the pond. You carry on." The wily old-timer then held up his bucket and said, "I just came down here to feed the alligators." Shopping can be a risky business, especially when it involves a significant other's credit card. A man was sitting in a mall when his phone rang. It was his wife. "Hello, darling," she said sweetly. "I recently saw a necklace in a catalog, and I want it. Do you mind if I use your credit card? The man asked, How expensive is it? Just $1,200, she replied. That cheap? Hell, get 4 of them for you, so you can wear a different one each season, he said generously. You're so kind, she cooed. Oh, I also want a ring. It's only $5,000. The man, still in a good mood, replied, Get 2, 1 for each hand. Thank you so much, she said, her voice dripping with affection. Oh, and I also want a new car. It's only $40,000. The man replied, Sure, why not? I love you so much, dear. I love you too, she gushed. I've got to go. Why? After that, the man looked around the mall and loudly asked, Did anyone drop a phone? School can be tough, but it can also be full of surprises. One day, during a math class, the teacher decided to test the students with a question that seemed simple enough. She looked around the room and finally landed on a group of girls sitting together in the middle row. With a confident smile, she asked, Can anyone tell me what happens if you put 2 into 1? The girls exchanged puzzled glances, trying to figure out what the teacher meant. The classroom was silent, the kind of silence that only happens when everyone is either completely confused or completely lost. The teacher waited patiently, hoping someone would step up with the right answer. After a moment, one girl slowly raised her hand. The teacher, pleased that someone was willing to try, nodded for her to speak. Miss, the girl began, her voice filled with a mix of curiosity and caution, either you have a lot of courage to even ask that, or for us, even just one would be too much to handle. The teacher, taken aback, couldn't help but laugh. Sometimes, the students really do surprise you. Fishing can be a relaxing pastime, but not for everyone. An old man was fishing by the creek when a wagon pulled by horses approached on the road behind him. Is the water shallow enough to pass through with my horses and goods? Bellowed the driver. You're mere few feet to the right. A small family made their way across not an hour ago, meekly said the old-timer, happy to shorten the driver's journey. The driver reined his horses across the stream. Not a few steps in, when the horses succumbed to the watery depths, barely holding on to the bank, the driver escaped the waters with his life intact while the horses drowned. Oi, you old fart. You said I could make my way across here. Didn't you tell me that a small family made it across? The old man was puzzled. I don't get it. The family of ducks passed, and their legs were much shorter than the ones on your horses. Even in retirement, there's always room for excitement. 2 old seniors were sitting on a bench outside a nursing home, slowly rocking back and forth as they sipped their drinks. One of them looked over at the other and asked, How's your weekend been, George? George looked at him and replied, It's been amazing. I was taking a walk down the street, and I came to a railroad crossing. Lo and behold, a girl was tied up on the tracks, just like in the movies. The other old-timer looked over in shock. No way. You're kidding. George put his hands up. I swear it's true. So, obviously, I rescued her. Obviously, I took her home, and we made love under the stars 17 times. I counted. The other man couldn't believe it. That must have been the best night of your life. George nodded. It most definitely was. Only problem was, I couldn't find her head. Blondes might have more fun, but sometimes they're in on the joke. A blonde walked into a bank in New York City and asked for the loan officer. She said she was going to Europe on business for 2 weeks and needed to borrow $5,000. The loan officer said the bank would need some kind of security for the loan, so the blonde handed over the keys to a new Rolls-Royce. The car was parked on the street in front of the bank. She had the title and everything checked out. The bank agreed to accept the car as collateral for the loan. The bank's president and its officers all enjoyed a good laugh at the blonde for using a $250,000 car as collateral against a $5,000 loan. An employee of the bank then drove the Rolls into the bank's underground garage and parked it there. 2 weeks later, the blonde returned and repaid the $5,000 loan and the interest, which came to $15. The loan officer, impressed, said, "Miss, we are very happy to have had your business, and this transaction has worked out very nicely. But we are a little puzzled. We checked you out and found that you are a multimillionaire. What puzzles us is why you would bother to borrow $5,000. The blonde replied, "Where else in New York City can I park my car for 2 weeks for only $15 and expect it to be there when I return?" Some people know how to make the most of their last day on the job. It was George the mailman's last day, after 35 years of carrying the mail through all kinds of weather to the same neighborhood. When he arrived at the first house on his route, he was greeted by the whole family, who congratulated him and sent him on his way with a tidy gift envelope. At the second house, they presented him with a box of fine cigars. The folks at the third house handed him a selection of terrific fishing lures. At the fourth house, he was met at the door by a strikingly beautiful blonde woman in a revealing negligee. She took him by the hand, gently led him through the door, which she closed behind him, and took him up the stairs to the bedroom, where she blew his mind with the most passionate love he had ever experienced. When he had enough, they went downstairs, and she fixed him a giant breakfast: eggs, potatoes, ham, sausage, blueberry waffles, and fresh squeezed orange juice. When he was truly satisfied, she poured him a cup of steaming coffee. As she was pouring, he noticed a dollar bill sticking out from under the cup's bottom edge. All this was just too wonderful for words. "This is amazing," he said, "but what's the dollar for?" She smiled and said, "Well, last night, I told my husband that today would be your last day, and that we should do something special for you. I asked him what to give you, and he said, 'Screw him, give him $1. The breakfast was my idea." Even shopping can be an adventure. Two friends met at the neighborhood supermarket. When they got to the checkout, one of the ladies started rummaging through her purse for her wallet. She took out a few things, including a TV remote. "Do you always take the remote with you when you go shopping?" The other woman laughed. "No," the woman answered, "but I asked my husband if he wanted to help me shop, and he said no. I asked him if I could take the car, and he replied that as long as I left him the TV, I could take whatever I wanted and get out of the house. So, I turned the TV to the fashion channel and told him he had nothing to worry about." Kids can be surprisingly good at making money. One day, the general manager at a bank noticed a young boy who came in every day and deposited exactly $100 each time. Curious, the manager told the clerk to send the boy to him the next time he came to the bank. The next day, the boy came in, and he was sent to meet the manager. The manager asked, "So tell me, how do you get $100 a day?" The boy replied, "Well, every day, I have a bet with a different guy." "About what?" the manager asked. "About the fact that I can kiss my right eye," the boy said. The manager laughed, "Ha ha, no way." The boy said, "We can bet if you really want to." The manager, confident that he couldn't lose, gave his consent. A few seconds later, the boy took off his ocular prosthesis and kissed it. The manager felt so stupid that he asked the young boy to give him back his $100. The boy agreed, but under one condition. "Let's have another bet," the boy said. "I'm pretty sure that you are wearing red girly panties. If I'm wrong, I will give you back your $100 plus another $100 for this bet." The manager, feeling overconfident, because he knew he wasn't wearing that kind of underwear, said yes. The boy then said, "But before you get undressed, we need to have 10 eyewitnesses to make it legit." The manager was okay with it and called all his staff. After taking off his pants, the manager felt happy, because he had just won $100. But then he noticed that the young boy was so happy about losing his money that he asked, "How can you be so happy about losing your money?" The boy replied, "Well, I had a bet with your staff about how many minutes it would take to make you take off your pants. Guess who won?" Not everyone has the knack for pulling off a heist. A blonde and a brunette decided to rob a bank. "So you remember the plan?" the brunette asked. The blonde smiled and nodded. "I'll keep the car ready. Good luck." The blonde ran inside, mask on and pistol in hand. 5 minutes passed, and nothing happened. The brunette glanced at her watch nervously. 10 minutes. 15 minutes. 20 minutes. This is taking way too long, she thought. What the hell is she doing in there? The brunette asked herself frantically. 30 minutes later, the blonde ran out with a rope, tied it to the back of the car, and jumped in. The brunette floored it, and the rope tightened, yanking a safe right through the bank wall and trailing it behind the car. A guard, with his pants down, ran after them, trying to fire his weapon, but failing in his awkward attempt to run with his pants down. Furious and red-faced, the brunette turned to the blonde and said, "I knew you'd screw this up. I told you to tie up the guard and blow the safe." Sometimes, the rich aren't as different from us as we think. In the 1950s, a group of friends decided to test a blind man to see if he could tell the denomination of bills. They started passing $1 bills to the blind man, and he could tell that they were $1 bills. Then someone gave him a 5, which he knew immediately was a $5 bill. Then they handed him a 10, and he still knew what it was. Then they alternated the 1, 5, and 10 bills, and he always got it correct. Finally, a rich man handed the blind man a $20 bill. He knew what it was. They continued alternating the bills, except for the $20. After several attempts to fool him, they handed him the same $20 from before. "This is a $20 bill, and I'd bet that it's the same one from before," the blind man said. One of the other men asked, "How do you know that?" The blind man grinned and said, "Because only one person in this group can afford a $20 bill. Even at 75, some people just don't know when to quit." A 75-year-old man, whose hair was completely white, married a 22-year-old girl, and she got pregnant. 9 months later, he was sitting in the maternity ward, talking to the nurse. "Hey, well, how'd I do?" he asked. The nurse said, "She had twins. Just goes to show, even if there is snow on the roof, there's still fire in the furnace." The nurse smiled and added, "But you better change the filters, because both babies are black. Even animals can get into trouble if they are not careful." A Czechoslovakian man went to the zoo and headed straight to the lion exhibit. He wanted a closer look at the lions, and before anyone could stop him, he was at their cage. He was soon attacked and eaten by one of the lions. A witness to this tragic event said to the zookeeper, "I saw the whole thing happen. It was a male lion who ate the Czechoslovakian." The zookeeper opened up one of the male lions, but found no Czechoslovakian. He then opened up the other male lion, but again, there was no Czechoslovakian. Finally, they opened the female lion, and there was the Czechoslovakian. Moral of the story: never believe someone when they say the Czech is in the male. Sometimes, little kids can be the biggest troublemakers. A little girl said to her mother, "Mommy, when you were away at work, a strange lady came around." "Not now," said Mommy. "Wait until Daddy gets home." So they waited until Daddy got home, and then Mommy said, "Now, dear, what were you saying about Daddy and the strange lady?" Daddy started to say something, but Mommy cut him off. "You keep quiet. I'll be talking to my attorney in the morning. Carry on, dear." "Well," said the little girl, "Daddy told me to stay downstairs while they went upstairs, but I followed them without Daddy seeing me. I saw them hugging and kissing at the top of the stairs, then they went into your bedroom and shut the door. But I went up and looked through the keyhole." "Clever girl," purred Mommy. "What could you see through the keyhole?" "I saw them hugging and kissing some more, and then they started to take each other's clothes off. They carried on until they had nothing on, and then the lady got on the bed, and Daddy got on top of her." "Yes," said Mommy, "and then what happened?" "Then they did what you and Uncle Jack did when Daddy was in Vancouver last year," said the little girl confidently. Miscommunication can lead to some hilarious situations. A judge was interviewing a woman regarding her pending divorce and asked, "What are the grounds for your divorce?" She replied, "About 4 acres and a nice little home in the middle of the property, with a stream running by." The judge, a bit confused, said, "No, I mean, what is the foundation of this case?" "It is made of concrete, brick, and mortar," she responded. The judge tried again, "I mean, what are your relations like?" "I have an aunt and uncle living here in town, and so do my husband's parents," she said. The judge, getting a bit frustrated, asked, "Do you have a real grudge?" "No," she replied. We have a two-car carport, and I've never really needed one. Please, the judge tried once more, is there any infidelity in your marriage? Yes, both my son and daughter have stereo sets. We don't necessarily like the music, but the answer to your question is yes. Does your husband ever beat you up? Yes, she responded. About twice a week, he gets up earlier than I do. Finally, in frustration, the judge asked, Lady, why do you want a divorce? Oh, I don't want a divorce, she replied. I've never wanted a divorce. My husband does. He said he can't communicate with me. Criminals aren't always the smartest bunch. The ringleader of a gang hired the best safecracker for their bank job. In criminal circles, he was known to crack any safe, and the police never caught him. When the day of the heist came, they entered the bank, secured the building, corralled the hostages in the bank manager's office, and the safecracker proceeded to the locked vault. After a few quick inspections, the safecracker sat down, pulled off his shoes and socks, and started manipulating the combination dial with his toes. Why are you wasting time like this? The ringleader asked. The safecracker replied, I'll have it open in a jiffy. This only takes 5 extra seconds, but it really confuses the guys in the fingerprint lab. And that, my friend, is the end of our story. If you're still here, it means you enjoyed it, so go ahead and subscribe. You won't lose a thing, but I'll gain a wonderful friend in you. Is this conversation helpful so far?